The 52-year-old was one of the hottest names on the market during this cycle after a wildly successful run. As the New York Jets have a new head coach, and no surprise, it is Aaron Glenn. Have the longest playout drought in the league at 14 years and counting.
Now, I wanted to open up this video by saying this isn't necessarily a poor hire or a poor decision, but it's definitely a very interesting one in an offseason that we've seen the theme of former defensive players returning to the teams that originally drafted them. Their division rivals seem to have made a similar decision. So before we make this video, make sure you drop like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to get the latest NFL news to your device. And now that we get all that out of the way, Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? It wouldn't be an understatement to say that the New York Jets were a catastrophe this past season, and it was a failure from multiple levels, but primarily from the front office and from ownership. I mean, everything from prematurely firing your defensive-minded head coach, although he clearly wasn't the problem just a few weeks into the regular season, trading away Mike Williams because Aaron Rodgers said this about him.
Two verticals, Allen's down the seam, Mike's down the red line. So I'm looking at Allen, he puts his hand up, three guys go with him, so I'm throwing a no look to the red line. And when I just peek my eyes back there, he's running an inbreaker. So it's got to be down the red line.
All the way to an article about the New York Jets supposedly being ran by a 17-year-old. I mean, honestly, I don't think it's a bad idea to get 17-year-olds to run front office organizations, because just based upon what we saw from Hard Knocks offseason last year, it seems like Schoen's son is a better GM than he is.
Jaden Daniels, trade up and get him. Why not?
Okay, if Jaden Daniels...
You only get this job once. Let's try to win.
Carson's gonna make a hell of a GM someday. It was just such a strange season, and once it seemed like the New York Jets went from potential Super Bowl contenders all the way to one of the worst teams in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers decided then that he should drop his Netflix documentary series.
Another term for the caterpillar. It's really the caterpillar the entire time. And caterpillar opens his wings and just cannot believe this is my life now. I get to fly around. I get to smell flowers and eat flowers.
Through it all, you hear rumors about Garrett Wilson potentially wanting to demand a trade, and how could he not want to demand a trade considering the fact that the team has two wide receiver ones, and Aaron Rodgers clearly is going to show a little bit of more favoritism towards Davante Adams than for Garrett Wilson. I mean, I don't think that this is a roster that is poorly constructed. I think this is a team that has had so many distractions and so much to overcome that alas, they just couldn't do it, and I don't think Woody Johnson helped things. I think if Robert Saleh was still the head coach throughout the season and they didn't tinker and make so many decisions throughout the regular season, maybe, just maybe in the latter part of the season, this team could have gotten it together. But from the very beginning, this team was doomed. I mean, Aaron Rodgers missed mandatory minicamp to go on vacation, for crying out loud. And this is a brand new quarterback with brand new wide receivers and a brand new offensive coordinator that he needs to make it work out with, even though they have familiarity with each other in the past. But the pieces were there defensively. Sauce Gardner came into the season as one of the better defensive backs in the NFL. Quinnen Williams was without a doubt a top 2 or top 3 defensive tackle in the NFL. And in the beginning of the season, the New York Jets were one of the best defensive teams when they were coached by Robert Saleh. But that all went out of the window once Saleh got fired and replaced by Jeff Ulbrich. The crazy part is this team was also in position to potentially draft Brock Bowers, but they decided to draft Ali Fashanu primarily because they were really trying their best to protect Aaron Rodgers and make sure what happened last year didn't repeat itself. But when you see interviews like this from Garrett Wilson,
if the Jets approach you about a contract extension, would you like to stay here long term?
I don't know, man. I just figure I just do whatever, whatever, go about my day, however, figure my feet at, and if they do it, I would be a blessing. That'd be awesome. I love the Jets. At the end of the day, they were the ones that believed in me, so yeah,
You know that this team is in some serious trouble. Now, you saw us dominate last weekend in the divisional round of the NFL playoffs. You've seen us dominate in the NBA recently on a day-to-day basis. You guys have been blowing up my DMs telling me how much money you're making, and now PrizePicks is giving us another free square. And we're going to turn this free square into some guaranteed cash. First, if you haven't signed up for PrizePicks, make sure you go to the link in the description down below. Use my promo code Mikerophone to get a free $50 when you make an entry of $5 or more. And then then if you want to make some cash, follow these picks and enter them ASAP before they change the projections on them. Obviously, pick Jaden Daniels to go over 0.5 passing yards because that's guaranteed. I'm pairing that with James Cook getting over 2 receptions because I feel like Josh Allen's going to check down to him a lot that game. Then I'm pairing that with Terry McLaurin getting less than 5 receptions and Devontae Smith getting less than 4 receptions. Now, I'm going to do a 4-man power over here, but obviously if you want to lower your payout but maximize your odds of hitting, then you could do a 2-man or a 3-man. And I give away additional picks on my Instagram story at the Flight Mike and on Snapchat Flight Mike Snap. And thank you PrizePicks for the sponsor. I don't think Garrett Wilson can demand a trade yet. He's still under contract for a few more seasons. But when you see clips like this, you really can't blame Garrett Wilson for wanting out of the Jets organization, or at least hinting that he may want out. Now, Garrett Wilson since then has walked back his comments and said that he doesn't have anything against Aaron Rodgers, but there's so many decisions that the Jets need to make this offseason. And the first one was who is going to be their next head coach. And a decision that I personally felt like was very peculiar, the New York Jets did make their next decision at head coach, and it's a very interesting one. According to Adam Schefter, there's a new coach in New York. The New York Jets are hiring former Lions defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn as their new head coach. The former Jets 1994 first-round pick, who became a personnel scout for the team, now is becoming their head coach. I think Aaron Glenn is going to become an excellent defensive head coach, and I think that's a huge reason why he accepted this job, because the New York Jets head coaching gig was not an attractive gig at all whatsoever. But at the same time, when you take a look at what Aaron Glenn was able to do with the Detroit Lions this past year, it's nothing short of amazing. This is a guy that lost his best defensive player to injury throughout the regular season. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, in the divisional round game versus the Washington Commanders, this is a team that was without Carlton Davis, Marcus Davenport, Khalil Dorsey, Aiden Hutchinson, Emmanuel Mosley, Malcolm Rodriguez, Ennis Rakistra. I mean, this team was completely depleted of their defensive backs and their edge rushers, and they tried to reload throughout the regular season by trading for Zadarius Smith. But ultimately, the fact that these defensive players were all injured contributed to why Jared Goff turned the football over 5 times throughout the game. Jokes aside, Aaron Glenn still had this defense in the top 10 in terms of points allowed last season, and this team was decimated by injury. So I personally think that Aaron Glenn is going to be a good defensive head coach. What I think is very interesting about this hire is you went from a very good defensive head coach in Robert Saleh, who I understand Jets fans are going to come out and say, but Mike, Robert Saleh had a terrible win-loss record. He deserved to get fired. I don't think any coach would have been able to make it work with Zach Wilson as his starting QB, with a battered offensive line, a defense that was slowly improving, and no wide receivers until Garrett Wilson came in. I think the hiring of Aaron Glenn is a very interesting one because it pretty much indicates that the Jets feel like they may have messed up by firing Robert Saleh, but I think this is probably one of the few head coaches that could turn around the New York Jets organization, primarily because he'll probably be able to make the most out of the New York Jets weapons on defense. Now, there are still huge questions for the New York Jets as a result of this hiring. The answers aren't necessarily answers that the New York Jets may like. The first question is, who's Aaron Glenn going to target to be the new offensive coordinator for the New York Jets? Because once you bring in a defensive-minded head coach, your offensive coordinator position becomes that much more crucial. And there are some pretty good candidates out there for offensive coordinator that could completely change everything. And my top pick for this position would without a doubt be Clint Kubiak. According to Zach Rosenblatt, Clint Kubiak is a name in the mix to be Jets offensive coordinator for Aaron Glenn, but he's also in the mix for Seattle's offensive coordinator job. He spent 2024 calling plays for the Saints. He has tremendous experience working under Kevin Stefanski in Minnesota. He became the Vikings offensive coordinator in 2021 and led a top 12 defense and got some great quarterback play out of Kirk Cousins. Then he spent a year under Kyle Shanahan in 2023 as the passing game coordinator before being hired by the Saints as an offensive coordinator this past year. And you might be thinking that the Saints were terrible this past year in general. He did get a good season out of Derek Carr. So that's the first big decision they have to make. But probably the most crucial decision the Jets have to make is who is going to be their quarterback next season. They currently hold the number 7 pick in the NFL draft. There's definitely positions of need that this team could fill apart from the quarterback position. I think if they want to draft a developmental QB QB on day 2, that's fine, but clearly you're out of position to draft Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward, unless if you want to reach on Jalen Milroe. So unfortunately for Jets fans, I know Aaron Rodgers is a very divisive figure in this organization. The best option you have is retaining Aaron Rodgers and hoping that you could actually get an offensive coordinator that could turn back the clock for Aaron Rodgers. And according to Harrison Glazer, that seems to be what Aaron Glenn may want to do. There's word out there's been leaks I've heard, that Aaron Glenn has made it known that he would like to keep Aaron Rodgers. I don't think it's the worst idea, primarily because you don't really have that many better options in free agency. I mean, what are you going to do? Go bring back Sam Darnold or sign Justin Fields? I mean, don't get me wrong, there's some like solid developmental QBs that you could take a flyer on, like Trey Lance, for instance. But apart from that, there aren't many good options. I mean, I guess you could sign Carson Wentz or Jimmy Garoppolo, but really, apart from that, there aren't really good options for quarterbacks during the offseason this year. So your best chance might be to run it back with Aaron Rodgers. And the offense is already stacked as well. It was just the front office this past year and how much of a distraction they were and how much tinkering this team did throughout the regular season that really contributed to their downfall. I feel like a full offseason with each other where everyone attends training camp, gets acclimated to the new front office and coaching staff. This is still a team with Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, a much improved offensive line, and a very solid defense. I feel like continuity could do a lot for this team if they make sure Brick Johnson doesn't get in the way. At the end of the day, I think the hiring of Aaron Glenn was a home run. Obviously, this is contingent upon who they're going to hire as their offensive coordinator and whether or not they decide to retain Aaron Rodgers. But let me know in the comment section down below if you're a Jets fan. How do you feel about this hiring? Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.